American scientist and futurist Roy Amara is famous for this famous observation. We tend to overestimate the effects of technology in the short run and underestimate it in the long run. Later on, the research firm Gartner came up with their own tongue-in-cheek explanation for this phenomenon. They claim that when we have the innovation trigger, when we get the new innovation, and we don't know a lot about it, we tend to inflate our expectations, especially the people building the things, the pioneers, the people investing in these people, the people who want to sound smart. Everyone is selling us a very big dream. But sooner or later, we realize that the new technology is not going to deliver on everything we were promised. And then we get very disillusioned. We get overly pessimistic. And it takes a few years until we really wrap our minds around what this thing is good for. How can we use it? And then we get to this plateau of productivity. Then we really understand how it fits in our lives. A very famous example of this is, of course, the web. Back in the late 90s or early 2000s, it was enough to build your own, little online e-commerce site, drive traffic to it, even if it meant buying, Super Bowl ads. Revenue wasn't important, profit wasn't important, it was a new economy. And a lot of people invested in this dream, and then we got a very rude awakening in the form of the dot-com bubble completely bursting. And I remember little later on, like in 2001, people were saying things like, the internet is really cool. It's for sharing information. There's no way to make money on the internet, really. And it took some smart web-native companies later on to show us that actually there's really good business to make in the internet, and it's actually very, very valuable for users and for businesses alike, and of course, it only grew from there. So the question is, are we in a hype cycle with AI? I think if I did a vote right now, most of you will say yes. But of course, it's a model. We can't know for sure. It works this way sometimes it doesn't. But it does feel like we're here. For the web, it took a few years until we reached peak expectations and a few more years until we realize what it's good for. So we're maybe still in this first few years. And I'm not going to talk about all the hype, not AGI and not the job market being destroyed, all this stuff. I don't understand enough about it. But let's talk about stuff we do understand. Let's talk about software development. So I keep hearing this statement. The cost of software development went down to zero. And that's understandable because the hardest part, coding, is really where we spend most of our effort and time and money, and now it's much easier. These coding agents are so smart, they're so helpful. It does feel like we're so much more efficient, so yeah, zero. But if you just think about it a little bit deeper, this is a very naive statement, because the challenge with software was never coding. Coding is the mechanical part of it. Yeah, it's the most expensive maybe, but software is actually a constraints problem. Software has to serve a lot of needs, the needs of the business, the needs of the users, and the needs of the system itself, because software development is not like building a chair. It's like building a city. You have this infrastructure you need to extend and support, and it has its own needs. And it's really very hard job to do. We have to do a lot of things before we code, during the coding, after the coding. We have to research, to discover, to strategize, to iterate, to launch, to test. And we're doing this in imperfect organizations, which makes everything harder. So I'm not seeing AI eliminating the real cost of the full software cycle. So you might say, okay, maybe you're just being pedantic. Not the full software cycle, but definitely coding is now zero, nothing. Well, if you're following social media, you will notice that a lot of people are disagreeing because this later generation of coding agents and LLMs are actually very token hungry. We're finding that we're spending a lot of money and we're burning through our quotas very quickly. Then we're getting messages like this on social media. Yes, we're reinventing junior engineers to save on tokens. So, Here's another statement you'll hear a lot. We can now build it 10x or 100x faster. That sounds wonderful, and it is true. If you've never coded in your life and you're a vibe coder, you're now infinitely faster, not just 10x. And if you're in a startup and you're doing from 0 to 1, or 0 to version 0.1, absolutely much faster. There's no debate about this, and it's true. However, when you're working on more complex cases, larger companies, larger code bases, is it really 10x? Because there's a lot that goes into it. There's a lot of complexity, there's a lot of maintenance, and I haven't seen any research to actually indicate what is the real acceleration across the life cycle of the software. You know, maintenance, fixing bugs, etc. What is the real cost of relying on agents? So I don't think it's 10x. Maybe it's 5x, maybe it's 3x, maybe it's 0.5, 1.5x, depending on your context. So it's a bit hypey, this message. But I think even that is missing the point. Even if we can do 1.5x, it sounds amazing, but the real point is that through research we know that most of our ideas actually miss the mark. Most of them don't deliver outcomes. Most of them don't create impact. And it's only this subset of ideas that we want to launch. The other ones we don't. So you need to ask yourself, which of these companies are you working for? Are you optimizing for time to outcomes, or are you optimizing for time to output? Are you just rushing, using AI, to bloat your product with unnecessary features, to confuse your users with these features? Once you have these building blocks of these two assumptions, it's much cheaper and it's much faster to develop. You can build a whole magical world of AI. You can say, you know, everyone will start developing their own apps because it's so easy and fast, and then SaaS is dead. That's it. I don't know if you heard about this, the news, SaaS is dead. Or all code will be written by AI. I meet companies where there's a mandate. By the end of the year, no line of code is allowed to be written by a human. It all has to be AI. And that, of course, will mean that teams will massively shrink. I'm not going to go into all of this, but there is a subgenre of hype that is all about product management. And this is where I want to focus on today. So I generally see three archetypes provided, three kind of speculations about what will happen with product managers over time because of AI. I'm going to talk about them, and I'm going to give you a fourth option that no one is talking about, but I think we should be. Let's start with this guy, the AI PM. This person is a specialist in AI. This person understands LLM, inference, RAG, evals, skills, all this list of buzzwords and more. This person really takes the courses, really dive deep, really read all of the documentation of Anthropic. And this person is usually hired by AI companies because they need such specialties. The hype message is that we will all be this person. Unless you're taking the courses, unless you're becoming very proficient with the technology, you're going to be replaced. And I think this is nonsense. The statistics, the data right now suggest, and this is by a company called TrueUp, shared by Lenny in his newsletter, suggests that 1 in 7 jobs today actually require any of these AI skills. It's by far the fastest growing niche, and that makes sense because, honestly, these jobs nearly didn't exist until a few years ago. But isn't going to take over the job market? I doubt it. I think it's a specialty, like security, like networking, like fintech. When you work in one of those, you need to be an expert. But the rest of us, probably not. And it's very likely that there will be other layers of abstraction over time, so we don't all have to go and touch the wires under the hood every time we do AI. So mostly hype in my mind. The next archetype is the developer PM. This is a product manager that adopts some of the attributes of a coder. It could be that she's just using coding agents. She's working in Cursor or with Cloud Code, and that's actually not hype. You don't have to code to use these things. These things are really helpful. They really are designed to help you complete tasks and projects. They retain context between sessions. They are very good at building knowledge and searching across many files, so I highly recommend everyone to work this way. This is how I do most of my work today. So not hype. The other argument is that we will start coding. For what? Prototypes is the common answer. If we need to test, for example, in a usability test, someone needs to generate the prototype, why not a PM? I think that's beautiful. I think if you can do this, if you can vibe code prototypes, that's really useful. Just bear in mind that in the gamut of validation techniques, prototypes are only useful in the middle. We don't use them early on, and later on we use real code. So it's not every time you will need a prototype. Another reason to use prototypes is to communicate requirements. And I'm a bit iffy about this one, because I think requirements are best developed with your team. You need to create a skeleton and then have a discussion. Help them fill out the gaps. A prototype gives all the answers. Here's the design, here's the functionality. It's not a good starting point for a discussion. So I'm not a big fan of prototype as a PRD, if you like. But then there are these companies that claim that we need to become developer actually pushing production code. This is the most bizarre in my mind. I mean, if you're in a startup and everyone's coding, yeah, for sure, go for it. But in most companies, PM is a full-time job. This is something we should write for our CEOs to remember. PMs have a lot on their plate. Most of the PMs I meet actually don't get through everything they need to do. So doing also coding as an amateur part-time sounds ridiculous to me. But it's this weird flex that some companies have now. We're all using cloud code. We're all pushing code into production. The customer support person, the HR person. My heart goes out to these poor engineers at the receiving end of all of these changes. I'm not sure I'm buying this. Mostly hype, but there are grounds of truth in it. Then there's the next archetype. This is the person that was completely obsoleted by AI. No need for PMs anymore. This is mostly nonsense, let me tell you. It's mostly said by founders who never worked with a real product manager, who don't understand what product management is, but they want to draw attention to their startup and to themselves by saying, we killed product management using AI. Don't pay any attention. They don't understand what they're saying. Unfortunately, and they don't know it, there is a grain of truth there. And I think that in the PM sphere, there is one job that is at risk of being displaced by AI. To understand why, let's look at some historical example of people who were replaced by technology. For example, draftsmen. This used to be a very important job in many companies. These were the people who took the requirements or the design from an architect or a designer and translated them into schematics to allow, engineering, production, building of the thing. And it was really important. Some companies had rooms full of them. And then in the 1980s, computer-aided design appeared, and the job disappeared. Some of them became CAD draftsmen, but mostly today the architects and the designers use the CAD software themselves, so we don't need them. And this kind of typifies the sort of jobs that disappear. These are usually people who take one form of information, process it, and transfer it down in another form of information. Do we have anything like this in our companies today? Well, if you're doing this, what I call the planning waterfall, I think we do. We take roadmaps, we translate them into product backlogs and PRDs, stories, epics, in order to, drive agile development, to keep them busy. And in some companies, there's a dedicated person who does just that. That's their job, the delivery product owner. And if that's you, I think you should worry, because AI is very capable of doing this job. AI is very capable of generating requirements and backlogs. Is it as good a job as the human would do? Probably not. Does your company know the difference? Probably not as well. And even if they do understand it, there's a huge temptation to say, why do we need these 5 POs? We can just have one. And with the magic of AI, that person will do the job of 5. Or maybe we can just eliminate all of them and move the functionality. Let the person doing the roadmap use AI to generate the specs. Or even push it down to the engineers, becoming full-stack developers, another hypey term. So this is a job with a bit of risk right now. So maybe the smart move is to move upstream and become that person, the product manager. That person has a harder job. That person needs to take the messy context of the company, you know, management mandates, stakeholder demands, customer requests, and somehow generate a roadmap out of all of this. That's a lot of hard negotiation, politics, consensus building. It's harder for AI to do this work. So does this give you job security? Maybe, perhaps more. And I know many of you actually wear both hats. I'm not a big fan of this split between the PM and the PO. I like to merge them, but even in this constellation, I think if that's how your company is working, you're at risk. And that's because technology doesn't just eliminate jobs, it sometimes eliminates entire companies. If you think about new technologies we had to adopt internally as the customers, as the users of the technology, some companies really got it. Some companies were early adopters. Some companies used it to generate real advantages for themselves, while other companies were much slower to adopt and used it maybe not in the perfect way. Maybe they need to redo it multiple times. There are many stories like this for each one of those, and I'm sure you have examples for agile development that you know of. And I argue that AI is going to be one of those. AI is going to create this gap between the companies that understand how to use AI internally correctly, what I call the modern technology companies, versus the more traditional ones. This is a bit abstract. I need to explain to you what I mean by modern versus traditional. So I like to use this model. I call it the product operating model. It argues that each tech company has 8 functions. Think of them as 8 subsystems in your body. And you need to have all of them. We have strategic context that includes vision, mission, strategy, research, both quantitative and qualitative, knowing how to do it, doing it on an ongoing basis, setting goals and metrics and actually measuring them. Then, of course, there's product discovery, product delivery, and go-to-market, which are all one part of big value flow, operations and infrastructure, and culture. Culture is very important. It underlies all of this. So in a traditional company, it looks kind of like this. We're investing mostly in execution. Product delivery, go-to-market, and operations. The whole company is designed as an execution unit for the ideas of the managers. And I tend to think of this as like of a robot, a very powerful robot with a very strong limbs, but very soft software. This robot, because there are no shared goals, is not very well aligned. The left hand and the right hand don't know what they're doing. It's really hard to do even simple things because they're so uncoordinated. This robot, because there's no research and no strategy, doesn't know where to go. It keeps going in the wrong direction, keeps stumbling over furniture, keeps falling and getting up. This is how some companies operate. The modern company, on the other hand, and this company will definitely use AI to boost these things. Which means if you have a feature factory today, you will have a feature factory on steroids tomorrow, thanks to AI. Does this send the company in the right direction? I would argue the opposite. The modern company is one that recognizes that the 8 functions are there and tries to actually work on them, tries to really build these skills inside the company. No company is perfect. I haven't seen a company that does all of it by the book, but at least they try. And these companies, I believe, will use AI across the board because AI is incredibly helpful for a lot of these hard tasks. It can help us collect information and process it. It will help us come up to better decisions, implement framework, do what we call cognitive offload. The combination of human intelligence with AI, with research, with evidence, can actually be very, very powerful. And I believe this is the future. And I think this is where we get our 4th archetype, the one we never talk about, the AI-empowered PM. Terrible name. I need to come up with something else. Let me know later if you have a better idea. But this person is using AI to work better themselves and also to better their company, to move their company in the direction of modernity. And I think this is a much more empowering, a much more important sort of role than becoming a much more efficient cog in the feature factory. Just to give you an example of what this means, think about OKRs. OKR is this process where you take this very messy context of the company and translate it into very good outcome-based OKRs that are all aligned top-down and across. Very hard. Most companies fail to do this. I meet so many cases of misuse and overuse of OKRs. In my experience, AI can really help. I've done this with some companies, and I'm actually launching or thinking about launching a course to teach how to do this. So this is my kind of commercial pitch. If you're interested in this, I'm really interested to hear from you about your experiences. You can scan it, or you'll get a link later on. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. There are so many other areas where I think AI can help us do our job better. And these are just the things that I know. I'm just projecting what I think product managers should do today and where AI is helpful. It's not helpful across the board. I have a whole article explaining this as well. I'll give you a link to it later. But AI can be so empowering for us. We can be so much better PMs and not just coders or experts on AI. So my point here is to say we're still in the early stages of the curve. We're still in this part where we don't really know what the future holds. And all of these examples, the no PM, the developer PM, the AI PM, in my mind is a case where we start from the technology and then we work our way backwards and say, what does it mean for product management? And I don't think that's the way we should think about it. We should start with what we want, the goals of the companies, the goals of PMs, and ask ourselves, how can AI help us achieve these goals? And that's what I'm trying to do with the AI PM. And I think in your companies, and for yourself too, you need to think where you want to be on this gamut. Do you try, are you somewhere, you're probably somewhere in the middle. Are you trying to move more to the right? Or are you using AI to actually accelerate towards the left? Are you opening a gap with these companies that will use AI in a very useful way? Finally, I have an article that summarizes a lot of what I said today. So if you scan it, you'll get there. And there you can also get the links and the mentions I had before. I'm sure you guys have questions or observations or objections. So I'll be around. So if you have any questions for me, please let me know. Thank you very much.